In 1888, in foggy, dark streets of the East End of London, better known as the Whitechapel district, lived a serial killer that would go down in history as Jack the Ripper. Even though the Whitechapel district was known for its violence and crime, the string of murders conducted by Jack the Ripper would terrorize the public like no one had seen before. He was described as a madman with no clear motive. Even though his famous murders only included 5 women, many theories suggest that he claimed the lives of up to 11 women. All of the victims of the 5 were prostitutes. All 5 killings took place within a mile of each other from August 7th to September 10th of 1888. Several other murders occurring around that time period have also been investigated as the work of Leather Apron, which is another nickname given to the murderer. A number of letters were allegedly sent by the killer to the London Police Service, often known as the Scotland Yard, taunting officers about his gruesome activities and speculating on murders to come. The name Jack the Ripper originates from a letter, which is famously known now as the From Hell letter, that was published at the time of the attacks. Despite countless investigations claiming definitive evidence of the brutal killer's identity, their true name and motive are still unknown. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, a serial killer known as the Zodiac Killer terrorized Northern California. There were at least 5 victims, but later on, the murderer would claim he killed at least 37 people in total. On December 20th, 1968, on Lake Herman Rome in Vallejo, 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen were shot and killed while sitting in a parked car in a gravel parking area. By the time police arrived, Betty was found dead, but David was still alive. Unfortunately, he would die on the way to the hospital. This was the first murder that the Zodiac Killer conducted and got away with. The Zodiac's next crime would happen on July 4th, 1969, in Blue Rock Springs Park, only a few minutes away from the previous crime. The Zodiac Killer approached a parked car with a flashlight and then murdered 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin and 19-year-old Michael Maggio. Both were still alive when found, but only Michael would survive. He was able to describe the shooter as a young, white male, 26 to 30 years old, a stocky build, roughly 200 pounds or larger, about 5'8" with light brown curly hair and a large face. Within an hour, the police received a phone call from someone who claimed to be the shooter and the shooter in the Lake Herman Road murders. On August 1st, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Herald all received a handwritten letter by someone who claimed to be the shooter. The letters revealed specific details about the killings to prove that the writer was indeed the murderer. All the letters were signed with a circle with a cross through it, the symbol that would eventually be known as the mark of the Zodiac Killer. Also included in the letter were 3 different codes that the killer demanded be printed in newspaper or else he would kill again. The Zodiac Killer said that the cracked codes would reveal his identity. On August 4th, 1969, another letter was received that started with the phrase saying, "This is the Zodiac speaking," marking the first time the killer referred to himself as a Zodiac. On August 8th, the code was cracked by a couple in Salinas, California. The codes read, "I like killing because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all to kill. Something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and those I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for the afterlife." After claiming 3 more lives and causing nationwide terror, the Zodiac Killer wrote his final letter on January 29th of 1974, concluding the letter with a new score. ME equals 35, SFPD equals 0. On December 26, 1996, in Boulder, Colorado, Patsy Ramsey claimed to have discovered a ransom note for her 6-year-old daughter, JonBenet Ramsey, on the back staircase inside the Ramsey home. This prompted her to call the police at 5:52 a.m. to report JonBenet is missing. The only people inside the house were John Ramsey, her father, Patsy, her mother, and her brother Burke. Oddly enough, JonBenet's body was found inside the home in the utility room in the basement less than 8 hours later. The body was found by John, and duct tape was found across her mouth and a smooth cord around her neck. When police arrived, it was suspected that the crime scene was heavily compromised due to multiple people arriving at the scene. The police had also claimed that they had not searched the house after Patsy's initial call because there was no reason to believe that JonBenet was in the home. At the time of her death, JonBenet was known as a child beauty queen superstar, having won at least 5 high-end child beauty competitions. Her death was ultimately ruled a homicide. The autopsy stated that JonBenet's official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. Due to JonBenet's beauty queen popularity and her mother being a former beauty queen, the case caused nationwide immediate interest. Today, the crime is still unsolved and remains an open investigation with the Boulder Police Department. On September 29, 1982, 7 people in the Chicago area ingested poisoned Tylenol pills, collapsing and dying shortly after. The victims included 12-year-old Mary Kellerman, 27-year-old Mary Reiner, 31-year-old Mary McFarland, 35-year-old Paula Prince, 27-year-old Adam Janus, 25-year-old Stanley Janus, and 19-year-old Teresa Janus. Adam Janus ingested a Tylenol and died at the hospital. When the family came back to mourn, Stanley Janus and his wife Teresa took a Tylenol and died, making it 3 deaths in the same family on the same day. However, this tragedy is what led investigators to connect the dots. Cook County investigator Nick Pichos compared the Janus' Tylenol bottle to Mary Kellerman's and noticed they had one similarity, a control number, MC2880. Deputy Medical Examiner Edmund Donahue asked Pichos to smell the bottles, and Pichos replied that they both smelled like almonds. The poison cyanide is also known to smell like bitter almonds, which in large amounts can cause seizures, cardiac arrest, and respiratory failure. The blood test on all of the victims showed that they had taken a dose of 100 to 1,000 times the lethal amount. Donahue spoke to an attorney from Johnson & Johnson, Tylenol's parent company, and after all the victims were buried on October 1st of 82, that the Tylenol bottles were intentionally poisoned with potassium cyanide. Immediately, over 31 million bottles of Tylenol were recalled by the manufacturer and were issued warnings. They also offered to replace recalled bottles with new bottles and offered a $100,000 reward to anyone who may have any information on the perpetrator. These precautions cost the company over $100 million. There were several more copycat deaths across the United States after the initial incident had occurred. This led to the invention of safety seals that you see on medicine bottles today. To this day, no suspect has ever been charged or convicted of the poisonings. On the evening of March 31, 1922, Hinterkaifeck Farm in Bavaria, Germany, 6 residents were murdered with a pickaxe. The victims included husband and wife Andreas and Kazela Gruber, their widowed daughter Victoria Gabrielle, Victoria's children Kazela and Joseph, and the family's maid Maria Baumgartner. 2-year-old Joseph was killed in his crib and Maria was killed in her bed, while the rest of the family was then murdered in the barn and stacked on top of each other. Upon the discovery, authorities concluded that the murderer actually lived on the farm for 6 days after they committed the crime. Even after the family had died, cattle were still being fed, meals were being eaten in the kitchen, neighbors reported seeing smoke rising from the chimney, and the family dog was tied up to a post when the mailman came on Saturday. The bodies were discovered the next day. What makes this crime even more chilling was that Maria was actually hired the same day she was killed, replacing the previous maid who had quit 6 months earlier due to the house being haunted. She reported to the family hearing footsteps in the attic and voices. Around the time the previous maid had quit, the Gruber family had also begun to hear voices from the attic. Andreas had also noticed a set of house keys had gone missing, an unfamiliar newspaper in the house that he had never seen before, plus scratches on the family's tool shed like someone had tried to pick the lock. He had also reported seeing a pair of unfamiliar footsteps leading from the woods toward the back entrance of the family's home. Despite repeated arrests, no murderer has ever been found, and the files were closed in 1955. If you enjoyed today's video, then please like and subscribe. Don't forget to tell me what you think of today's picks in the comments below. See y'all next time. Good night.